Thanks, Mum. Welcome, everybody. It's a privilege to be up here on stage, sharing this stage with many other great speakers giving up their time today. Hope you're having a good day so far. And I'm up here to go through an optimization story. Oh, the clicker's not working. I need to turn it on. So I'm Tony Brown, I'm from Space 48. I love learning and collaborating, and I've been around the Magento community for quite a while now. So just to give a bit of an overview of what I'm going to discuss today, I'm going to go into the power of monitoring and how important it is. The focus of this optimization story is primarily around the full page cache and the efficiency of it. And I'm specifically going to go through some examples on Magento 1 to improve that, and then also discuss full page cache for Magento 2. So kicking off, monitoring. Monitor as much as is practical, it would be my advice. It's essential to maintain a healthy site. It allows you to get visibility of problems, perhaps even before the product owner or visitors are aware. You can see trends for problems that may occur down the line. It can help with debugging. But one of the biggest points I'd like to make is that really you should have a clear understanding of the expectations of your product owner as to what they believe is good performance. Obviously, we want to strive for every bit of code that we do is as optimized and as fast as possible, but it's still a commercial world and we have to be mindful of the time we invest in that, so we have to tie that together with the expectations of the product owner, and then your monitoring should be geared up to give you visibility of that. There's so many tools out there that you can use. It's, you know, we're so lucky in this day and age to have so many options. There's just a few of them. One of the main ones that we use is New Relic. And this tool covers a lot of the bases. It's got alerting in there, which, as I say, is very important. It gives you visibility of not only how long the server takes to generate a page, but how long the customer's expectations and the experience that they actually get. They also have error alerting in there, lots of features, but this is giving you visibility on your production site. So this is monitoring what's going on. There's another tool that we use, which is Blackfire, and this is a little bit different. You can use this on a local environment to help optimize your scripts, and it gives very cool, funky looking graphs like this that will give you the critical path of a particular request or script as to where the bottleneck is in there, so that you can focus in on the area of script and optimize as appropriate. And this has been a really useful tool for us. But also a great feature is that you can actually hook this into your CI and have it automatically kick off profiles of particular types of page, and also set in assertions, so you're now setting expectations on the performance of certain pages, so you're protecting your team or yourself from problems getting out to production, because you're going to get visibility of them going over your threshold of performance. Another tool that we use is Datadog. We've only really just started looking into this to centralize all our login, and it's something else that's I would advise looking at. There are other centralized logging tools available. So in this story, where do we start? Well, it's with the monitoring. And we have this graph in New Relic, which you can see from the title is FPC Efficiency Overview. But for anyone that's used New Relic, they'll notice that this isn't a standard graph that would appear. And it's actually down to this gentleman, Max Chadwick, who is a developer in the United States from Something Digital. And he has done a number of blog posts and also done a video presentation through the Nomad Mage site discussing the efficiency of full page cache. And off the back of that, he has open sourced this module, page cache hit rate, and that is what you were seeing, the graph there that was going into New Relic. Now, this is specifically for M1, but there are principles that he discusses and I'll discuss today that cross over to M2. But it really is a great presentation, and I'd recommend looking into it. He discusses a lot of the gotchas that you can have around full page cache if you use his module and find it's not running efficiently. But I'm just going to discuss how we dealt with a particular circumstance. So please check that out. So with the full page cache, we want as much as possible to be served from the cache. I'm not saying that you should be hiding behind your cache, hiding nasty scripts that are taking too long, but we really do want the experience to be as fast as possible, so we need to maximize the usage of the full page cache. So a page like this, we want all this to be served every time, if possible, to all the visitors, but it's not quite as simple as that. We have to worry about certain areas that may need to be, for example, the basket is going to at some point become personal to that particular visitor as soon as they add to basket. Also, you may have an area that you want to cache independently, so that when that content needs to be refreshed, you don't have to expire all the pages that contain that content. And this is what's generally known as hole punching, and I'll refer to as containers. So Max's module looks at a concept of knowing the difference between how you have something called a full hit, a partial hit, and a miss. So hopefully this diagram is pretty easy to follow, but a request comes in, and Magento, it wants to return the request as fast as it possibly can. So it's loading the minimum amount of overhead for it to determine, have I got a cached copy of this page? So it can return it as fast as possible. So at this point, has it got a cached copy? If it hasn't, well, unlucky, we have to load the full Magento application, retrieve the content for the page and the containers, and push that back to the visitor. That's known as a miss. If we do have this page content in the cache, then a secondary question is asked, do I have all the cached versions of all the containers on the page? Are they cached now? And if they are, fantastic. We can merge that content together and pass it back as a full hit. That's the fastest possible experience you can have. If one of those containers, or more of them, we don't have a cached copy of it, we have, it's either been expired or it's not been cached yet, then we go into this middle state, which does require the full Magento application to load, and then it will get the content for those containers, merge it together, and pass it back. So it's less efficient, and that's why we've got this visibility here of understanding how it's performing. What we should be seeing is a lot of red on there. I know red's normally bad, but in this case, that's a full hit, and we haven't really got any to notice. So how can we further diagnose the issue here? Well, there's a secondary graph that comes with Max's module that will highlight the containers that are resulting in misses. And we can see here that there are two modules mentioned with 3 containers, something to do with times and a favorites module. So I'm going to discuss now how we resolve this. So module 1 was to do with opening times, a very simple module. It results of something like this being output to the page, call us today, 8 AM till 10 PM. So in the admin, this can be configured for the days of the week. You can set the opening and closing times, and also a custom message for each of those states. You can also add in special dates, such as bank holidays, and have custom closing times. And this block is dynamic because it queries the database to get that information, and it is in the header of every single page on the site. So why is it getting misses? Well, if we look at the container class, which deals with the logic on how to handle the caching of a container, we can see we've got a return false on the save cache method. So why would you do that? Well, I can presume that the developer at the time has realized, well, this content is dynamic, it's getting cached, I want to hole punch it. So they've looked out there, they've found this is how you can hole punch, and they're right, it will. But actually, by doing it in this way, you're never getting a full hit, because this is never getting cached. So how often should this actually change? It's actually 3 times a day. So at that time, this logic was being asked on every single request, what are the opening times? Yet, this should only change at the point it transitions from open to closed or closed to open, and at midnight each day, just to refresh that content. The goal of a full page cache, as I said, we want to reduce these hits to the app and only retrieve the data if absolutely necessary. So I think we're doing something a little bit wrong here. So we need to cache it, but it still needs to be refreshed at some point. So there are 2 ways that we can invalidate this content. It can either occur based on an action that occurs in the system, like a save or some other action, which will send cache tags through to be flushed to the cache backend, or it could time out. So the cache lifetime for a container is defined in the XML for the container. As we can see here, it's cached for a day in seconds. So we really just want to dynamically set that time so that we expire the blocks those three times. And we can do that in the same class, where if we define a lifetime, that will be, if there's no lifetime defined, it will fall back to the XML. So if we define one, it uses our lifetime, and we've got logic in the block that calculates, what time is it now, when does the state going to change, how long off is that, is it an hour? Okay, an hour's worth of seconds get put in as the TTL, as the lifetime. We also added in a custom tag for this block, so that if someone to the admin edited one of these times, we need that content to get flushed then as well. So we need to think more about how we're using this. The second module is a little bit more complicated. It's a MyFavourites module, which sounds similar to Wishlist, but it was actually completely isolated. And it consists of 2 areas, as we saw the 2 containers that were mentioned. There's this tab in the footer that works kind of like the basket. When things have been added to a favourite, then the counter will go up there and you can expand it and see it. And on the category listing pages, we've got this lovely heart icon, isn't it pretty? That goes in the corner whenever you've got a product that's favorited. Now, those heart icons are actually individual blocks. And we've got the same problem. Whoever has worked on this development has realized the second challenge: I've got some content, this is private data, I don't want this to be in a full page cache, I need to hole punch it. But unfortunately, they found the wrong way, and they've ended up returning false, and this data never gets saved in the cache. So for this listing page, every time a person visits it, it's asking, am I a favourite, am I a favourite, am I a favourite, which is obviously going to add overhead. So to solve this, we look towards how Magento already handled the private data and how we cache that. And the basket is probably the best example of that. And what we do there is, essentially, when a visitor comes to the site, if there are no favourites, then the cache container will be cached, and it will be shared across every single visitor to the site. However, as soon as they add a favourite or remove one, then that block becomes custom to them. It's actually saved in the full page cache as a custom container just for them. And that's how it does it with the basket. And that's handled via a unique cookie that's generated to sort of tally all this together. So if someone then adds or removes, it will invalidate that block. But with the favourite icons, we don't really want to use that technique as well, because what we really want to do is increase the chances of these full hits. So we could have just said, well, okay, we'll do the same technique, we'll make those hearts unique to the person and will have individual blocks that are cached for the person. But as soon as I go to this page, then it doesn't result in a full hit. It will if I refresh the page, but then I could go to another category and I won't get a full hit because it's got to ask, am I a favourite, am I a favourite? So a better approach was to include with the tab some JavaScript array that basically just contains the IDs of the products that have been favorited. And that gets invalidated along with the tab. So if we're adding or removing, then this block gets invalidated. And then we use JavaScript after the page is loaded just to add the heart icon for any of the products on the page that have got that ID. The result is massively reducing the partial hits and increasing the full hits to the site. Okay, so that sort of covers that journey that went on. I came across recently something on the site we took over which is pure genius. And I've just got to share this. It's probably the most elegant, efficient way I have seen to keep your cache fresh. So I feel sorry for the person that was in this state of mind that felt this was the best course of action to every single minute flush the full page cache.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. Now, it's very easy for me to stand up here on stage and question why did somebody do that? What were they thinking? But everyone is learning, right? And the monitoring I mentioned earlier and the processes that you put in place should be really there to protect yourself or your team from the mistakes getting out to the wild. But I would say really we need to embrace these situations where we've made mistakes, if it's our own or we've discovered one. But more importantly, I would encourage sharing them, and that's something I really believe in, that whether it's just within your team or out with the wider community, I think this is something that is a strength of the Magento community, that there's so many people out there sharing their experiences so that someone like that poor developer there is getting up the curve faster than perhaps they were at that time. So over to Magento 2's full page cache. This is like an evolutionary step. It's taking the power of what they had for full page cache in M1 and ramping it up, turning it up to, is it 11 or 12? Introducing the use of varnish is a big thing about this. So as I mentioned before, the Magento with a full page cache hit, it wants to return that as fast as possible. So in M1, Magento loads as little amount as possible to determine, can I return this? So with varnish, if we're getting a full hit, we don't even load Magento, we don't even load the web server. Varnish is a piece of software sat in front of your web server that serves content really quick, and that is a big performance gain. But they've got the same challenges. They have to understand how to deal with independently flushable content and that private content. And I'm really impressed and like the approach that's been taken for Magento 2, that with the shared sort of public content, which you could say for the opening times module, you would use this method, is to use edge side includes. That provides you a method of having that block independently cacheable, and it's really easy to use. And for private content, the approach is different again, in that it's utilizing Ajax and your local storage to store the private data. So the private data now is not, or shouldn't be, ever stored in the full page cache. It's only actually stored locally. But you can screw it up if you want, okay? So we need to be careful. You may be doing some development and you'll see something like this and you think, okay, I've done this development and I don't want this to be cached. I need to hole punch it. I don't want this to be cached anymore. And here's a block that's got cacheable equals false. But if you do that, then actually that renders that whole page that block appears on as being excluded from the cache. Now, thankfully, I think actually this is pretty common knowledge. And the fact that we've got the documentation there is playing a big part in this. And really, I'd encourage everyone to read through the documentation, particularly around the cache. And we're also in a stronger position, I believe, because the decision was made that not only Enterprise for Magento 2 has got the full page cache, but so has Community. And I think that's going to really help with the consistency with people's approach and understanding the best practice. Because best practice evolves. This is in the documentation around how to use the caching. And it mentions is scope private as a property you can set against blocks, and how it's not recommended to be used anymore. So you need to stay up to speed with what these things are. Now, I believe that there's some question around the fact that some people are still using this, and you have to be careful how you use it, because you could end up caching, without meaning to, private data, because this actually results in the block you've got it defined on by doing a secondary AJAX request to pull in that actual block content and replace it on the page. So we need to be careful. But on that very page where that appears in the documentation, it mentions how to configure Magento to utilize your own JSON AJAX request to get JSON back, and how you can use Knockout to just plug that content into the page. So use the docs. But we're missing, as far as I can see, the same kind of monitoring that Max has set up. One of the big things we do is consciously make sure we're putting things in place that are going to protect the developers. And we want this for M2. Now, it's made a little bit more complex by the fact we can't just do it with a Magento module, because Varnish is completely separate from that, and that is what is serving the full hits. But Varnish does have some basic applications like Varnish Stat to report this stuff, but I think there's room for a tool, maybe a New Relic module or some other logging software that could monitor the hit rates and give more granular information, like what is causing misses. So in conclusion, with great power comes great responsibility. The tools that Magento have given us here, FPC for 1 and 2, do a great job out of the box. But it's very easy if you're not quite up the curve to go around this and basically cause performance issues on your site. Really, you should be planning now for FPC at the beginning of your work. It shouldn't be an afterthought. It shouldn't be something like, oh, that content it needs hole punching. You need to think about this up front. Monitor as much as is practical and embrace those mistakes, but more importantly, share them. Thank you. I think we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 questions if we're quick. Anybody?
There's one in the back.
Topic of mistakes, what's the most memorable mistake that you've made that you've learned from?
Wow, I should have thought about that before I did this talk. It's not actually related to Magento, unfortunately, but I accidentally formatted my hard drive that had all my music collection that I'd passionately collected over years, accidentally formatted it. Because it was, back in the days, it was an NTFS drive, and I logged in at the command line, and basically the drive letters had shifted, and I was like, oh yeah, I want to format this other little drive I've got, and I formatted the wrong one. It made me cry. But now, I don't think you guys can learn from that one. It's just a sorry story. Any other questions?
There's one up there.
Yeah, I think hopefully I can do it without my phone.
I can hear you.
Nils, you can always go without a microphone.
So, you said the cacheable is false. cacheable equals false in the block.
Oh yeah.
As far as I know, there already is a fix developed on one of the recent hackathons this year to make it more intuitive. Like normally you would expect this block not to be cached. So there is a hackathon fix already for this. So if you apply it, then it is really only not caching this block anymore.
Cool. Good to know.
Yes, use your friends wisely. One more in the back there.
Hey there. Okay, so we use Varnish on Magento 1 a lot. So FPC hole punching, you've got to do other means, you've got to use ESI, you've got to use Ajax. For a while, performance looked like it was spot on, it was doing everything we need. But using New Relic, we were actually able to see things crawling the website was hitting the session locking issue. You look about that on Stack Overflow, and you get a lot of nothing. I was just wondering if you or anyone else in the room has anything to do with that or knows anything, because it just keeps on spitting up on New Relic.
Actually, yeah, we've seen the same thing, and we've not got a way around it. It's the same, from what we saw, you know, it's by design not to allow the session to be changed whilst it's in use. Has anybody else come across this, or more importantly, got a workaround?
For things that didn't require the session, I'm half tempted to hack the core. So if it's getting extra data, then don't use the session.
I mean,
the oxygen levels went down then.
Hey, as long as you know what you're doing, it's really just a guideline rather than a rule. I was actually I was looking for Fabrizio on this topic because he's had some things to say. Can we get the microphone run over here? You just toss it off. Catch it. Just kidding. He's camouflaged.
So we experienced this problem too, and had a conversation with Colin Mollenauer about. We experienced that with Redis, and he doesn't really have a solution, but there is a way to just disable locking, and that's what we did, and that works perfectly fine. So I'm not sure if the locking actually solves the problem, but disabling it solves it. So that's our solution to that specific problem. But we also experienced that we have a ton of health checks in place. We have ELBs, Varnish, and other things to do, and all the Google crawlers, and they come and visit the website exactly once and never again with the same session. So all the sessions that are created there are causing a lot of records in Redis. So what we have is we have an AOE black hole session module where you can have like a user agent regex, and if your request matches that, it only creates a fake session in memory that never hits your session backend. And it will expire, of course, after the request, but the health checks don't care about that. And that also helped to reduce the request greatly. So maybe this is helping.
I love Mage tie-ins. This is great.
We should do this like monthly. By the way, Black Hole Session was my favorite Soundgarden album. Sorry, I'm dating myself there. Cool. Any more questions for Tony?
Okay.
All right, thank you very much, Tony.